Good evening. Sir, I am Linish, Assistant Professor, Jain DMW University, Kochi. So my question is that Donald Trump has threatened that 100% duty imposed import from the BRICS countries. If US law permits, it will come into force. Then how it will affect our India's export to US, sir?
So he said if the BRICS go ahead with the plan that was floated by the Chinese to create an alternative BRICS currency in which they would trade with each other, then they would punish us with 100% tariffs. But frankly, not only is this alternative currency not ready, but I think there will be some resistance within BRICS. Don't forget the BRICS composition has expanded now, and there are countries like Egypt, the UAE, and others in it who are certainly not interested in undermining the US dollar. So I don't see a BRICS currency becoming a realistic threat, and therefore 100% tariffs will not happen in the foreseeable future. But if you want to look at Trump's other threat, not of 100% tariffs, which as I said is linked to a particular issue, but his desire to add tariffs to those countries that are protectionist. So India will have retaliatory tariffs in the US every time we impose tariffs on their products. I mean, Trump uses a bad example. He keeps talking about Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Frankly, if you remove all the tariffs on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, it won't make such difference because I believe we imported a total of 187 Harley-Davidson motorcycles in the last year. So it's not a large number. But I think the broader issue is we will need to re-examine our protectionism. I'm a bit more of a Jagdish Bhagwati man on this. I'm more in favor of trade liberalization because I think it's a win-win. I'm not in favor of liberalizing for countries like China, which frankly dump products on our market and drive Indians out of business. But trade liberalization with more responsible economies and who have fairer practices is actually healthy for us because it's always reciprocal. And our exports will increase. We desperately need to increase exports, not just for the old thing of getting foreign exchange. Our foreign exchange situation is okay. Why we need to increase exports is because export-driven growth will actually massively create manufacturing jobs in our country. If we keep being protectionist, people will not import our goods, and as a result, our exports will not grow. In fact, exports have not grown in the last few years of this government's economic policy. So that's why I think Trump's tariff threat should be taken seriously, and we should re-examine our own tariffs, because otherwise we will face retaliation. And it may happen very soon. I mean, Trump is coming to office on the 20th of January. Our budget is being presented on the 1st of February. We may find retaliation happening very soon.
You painted a black and white picture of the
I thought there was lots of gray there, sir.
A lot of grades about the Indian economy. My question is, in 1991, and you also referenced it several times in your talk, Dr. Manmohan Singh presented a path-breaking budget. Now, it's 34 years since that has happened. Why no other finance minister has been able to present a similar path-breaking budget which would have taken India to the next level? It's a question that's been in my mind always. Is it due to intellectual paucity or the shortcomings of Western economic models or any other reasons that you can think of?
So I would say, first of all, there was actually one more visionary budget, and that was Mr. Chidambaram's budget of 97, the UF budget. Unfortunately, that government only lasted 1 year, and I'm not sure whether they had the political clout to deliver, but he did have some very remarkably forward-thinking ideas. When he became finance minister in UPA, he was much more constrained by coalition politics than he was in a kind of very small coalition which had outside support. He got away with a much more visionary budget. But the truth is, and that my answer has already hinted at the truth, it is political constraints that have prevented too much forward thinking. What I've not been able to understand is what political constraints have held back this government, which for 10 years had a complete and absolute majority. They could have been much more visionary. In all fairness to my friend Arun Jaitley, the late Arun Jaitley, he did have a number of ideas that were fairly significant departures from some of the constraints in the economy. And as you know, the revamping of the banking sector, the reduction of indebtedness, the introduction of the bankruptcy code, these are all things that have helped you all in business as well. So some good things did happen. But the kind of vision that has been portrayed in my speech, I am fully aware that the challenges and constraints are overwhelmingly political. And the one obvious example is labor laws. When Mr. Modi, with a full majority, talked about labor laws, he got a massive pushback from every union in the country, including his own party's union. And he quietly withdrew the laws. Eventually, the suggestion was made that state governments could adopt laws. And this is going to be a very interesting thing. How far can state governments go? I'll tell you, I have been an opponent of the LDF government in this state. But I was very struck by the fact that as recently as 3 years ago, when I researched this last, the average time it took to start a business, to open a business from scratch, is 3 days in Singapore and the US. That is to get all the permissions required and start a business. The average in India was 114 days, and the average in Kerala was 236 days. Now, 10 days ago, our industry minister, Mr. P. Rajiv, made a statement saying that in Kerala now it takes 2 minutes to open a business. I would love to believe that, and if that's true, that is a considerable accomplishment. If a communist government can overcome its own fondness for overregulation and for various kinds of red tape that tie up everything, in this business of business opening, we can do it across the board. I have personal experience of how incredibly process-oriented and frankly unconcerned about time our bureaucracy is in Kerala. The simplest decisions that in most parts of the world would take a day or two, or perhaps even 15 minutes, will take weeks in Kerala. That is undoubtedly the case, and that needs to be tackled. But if it is possible for the communist government or the LDF government to do it, now I don't know if the 2 minutes is a hyperbole, and it may well be a hyperbole, but if he claims right now that all the permissions required to open a business can be done in one single window in 2 minutes flat, that is a tremendous step forward, and we can replicate that kind of model across the board. Then Kerala might be able to do something quite dramatic. If labor law reform means that the most powerful and frankly most troublesome labor unions, which are affiliated to the ruling party of the state, can be persuaded to sign on to reforms, which will, for example, permit businesses to hire and fire with greater flexibility, then you will find it possible to attract investors. I have been arguing for the last 5 years that Kerala should pass a Model Investor Protection Act. Why is that required? Because frankly, whereas every state in our country sadly has a record of farmer suicides, we are the only state in the country with a record of investor suicides. There are at least 2 examples in the last 5-6 years of people returning to Kerala with their life savings, investing them in land, factory, business, and then being stymied between the combination of the politicians, the unions, and the bureaucrats, and being forced to commit suicide as they see their life savings sunk down the drain. Now, that kind of thing requires an Investor Protection Act to ensure that the only thing you are not protected from is normal business losses. But you can and should be protected from the misuse of governmental power, political interference, and union trouble, so that again should reassure you your investments are safe in Kerala. I've met too many Malayalis, Marunaran Malayalis, who are reluctant to invest here because of this reputation. So if we can change these things, why can't we grow in Kerala? And we might be able to set an example for the rest of India. But this question of a visionary budget must always face up to the political realities. And this is going to be a challenge for any finance minister. I think Mr. Modi's government, despite now being a coalition, is still much less vulnerable to that kind of political weakness than some of the coalitions of the past. Whether it was the UF government of 96 to 98, whether it was the UPA government, where there were challenges. It could be possible that we can get a visionary budget, but we haven't seen one for some time.
Considering the GDP growth rate data for the past few years, it can be seen that the Indian economy is doing very well. But on contrary to it, I heard one of the opinions of one of the economists of JNU University. He opined that the GDP growth rate data is based on the organized sector data. They are not considering the unorganized data, unorganized sector data, which is actually depleting. So I just wanted to know your views on that.
I agree 100%. In fact, the informal sector, as it's called, is actually much larger in India than the formal sector, the organized sector, and it's therefore not counted adequately. Number two, the number of sectors in which the GDP calculations are done are weighted very heavily towards certain growth industries and insufficiently weighted towards the small, medium, and micro sector, which particularly after the demonetization of 20 the figures, or at least massage the figures to make themselves look good. So all of these things have raised serious questions about our GDP numbers, because again, if you compare to the UPA using the same criteria now, then the comparison is very unfavorable to the NDA government. They constantly talk about the UPA GDP percentage on the basis of the old numbers and the old basis for calculation, and they give their numbers on a new basis. Now, I don't want to waste too much time on this. Ultimately, all of us feel the economy in our pockets. You don't really need to sit around looking at numbers beyond a certain point. Yes, it's good in terms of attracting more investment if you're seen to be a booming and growing economy. Everyone wants to come to a growing economy because they think they'll get better return on their investment and so on. But apart from that larger picture, the reality of investment in our country has to be, how do you feel? Do you feel that you have more disposable income? Do you feel you're better off than you were last year? Are you able to afford the same things you were able to afford at the bazaar, the market last year? I mean, those are the kinds of things the average Indian feels, and the average Indian, I must say, there are two realities, the black and the white, that the previous questioner mentioned. There is a sector of our society, maybe 10 to 20%, that is absolutely thriving. And there is a large chunk that is not, that is feeling the pinch every day. So for a section of our Indians, for example, inflation is not a problem. In fact, they're beneficiaries of it. For another sector, it suddenly means that they can no longer buy as many vegetables at the market as they were able to buy, and that sector is larger. So that's why, this question of economic growth to me has got to be about people. It can't just be about numbers. And the numbers at the moment may look good superficially, but the reality in terms of inflation, in terms of people's purchasing power, in terms of employment, those are the realities that I was trying to tackle in my speech need to be improved. We have to create jobs, and we have to create jobs for everybody, for young people, for college graduates, in the agricultural sector, amongst women. All these are sectors which, frankly, at the moment are slipping and have been slipping ever since demonetization and then COVID. In COVID, we got the largest loss of female participation in the workforce of any country was in India.
Stay ahead with our cutting-edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.